Somebody's real low. I can't hear you. Any thoughts at all? So, what do your own relationships? How do they compare to uh, that number, 150? The speaker talked about the different examples of how things um, sort of level off around the number of 150. And he made a very important point that it's not a hard number, it's a number that gives us a framework in which to think about it, and it's pretty consistent.
I have a
Um,
question.
sure.
Um, in clicking on the Wikipedia stuff for Dunbar's number, he references stable relationship,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe that video covered that. But what does stable relationship mean?
Okay, so a stable relationship is when you have, let's say, enough contacts with a person that you have some regular interaction with them, and they don't sort of float into the ether of relationships. For example, you may have had a best friend in grammar school that if you saw them on the street today, you wouldn't know who they were. But during the time that you were friends, you knew lots of things about them and you contacted them regularly. So they actually went from your inner circle to almost oblivion. You wouldn't recognize them often from someone else. So the stable relationship is a relationship with in which you can operate on some level. When you see that person, you have, I call it eyeballs with them. When you have a sense of connection with them, you would share your banana with them. You know, you have a sense that there's something more than a Facebook friend. You know, I mean, because anybody who's on Facebook knows that there are a lot of people that sign up to be your friend, and you never hear from them again. They ask to be your friend. They never comment on anything that you have to say. They don't send you a birthday greeting. They don't do anything on the Facebook except signed up to be your friend. You know, so that would not be what you would call a stable relationship. That's a Facebook friend. But if you see somebody or they call you, let's say once a year, or you know their kids, or maybe you don't see them particularly, but you see their kids and you interact with them, you have some kind of relationship that your sense of where you are in the world depends on. Yeah, stable, you know.
I feel I must be one of those other. I hate to do it like this, one of other monkeys, because in the past we've been anyway. Black History Month. Um, the idea of what happens and did happen with me is the fact that I interacted with everybody. Everybody was my acquaintance. I made the differentiation about 30 years ago when someone asked, "Well, is she your friend?" And excuse me, I said yes. And she said, "Well, how do you make the differentiation between friend?" I said, "If I tell you I am sending you to my friend or my friend is coming over, that means you can put the key in the planter and know that all of your goods are safe. Your refrigerator will be restocked if they can do that, so on and so forth. They won't steal from you, they won't harm your pets or plants or anything like that." That was my definition and always has from that point forward been my definition of a friend. I will give part of my banana to others as well. So that's how I look at it.
Sure, sure. But as he made the connection between bonobos, and I think bonobos are very good. Their social structure is very informative to ours. Um, they will invest in new friendships. giving the banana is like the beginning of that kind of to the person you don't know. But the person who's in your stable relationship, you will probably exchange some form of banana with them on a number of occasions, you know. But I want to go to
The
I'm
one
sorry.
thing I did not mention,
Hmm.
it talks about uh, total contact or the amount of contact. I have people that I grew up with, and I have people that I've known for 30, 35 years. That's the blessing of being older. And we can pick up right where we left off. How so and so show pictures? Oh, so and so got really big. And when you're talking about joining people and they never say anything online, we haven't kept in touch, but that bond was formed. And, if you need to call me, call. And it just stays there. So I don't know where that fits into the.
Hmm. Okay, so I think I can explain that. Okay, so when we notice that he talked about the ability relative um, to the brain size, basically. And it has to do with it has to do with a number of neurons that's required to process personal relationships. He also talked about the emotional content. It's like when you care about someone, when you have them in that 150, you have a emotional need to check in with them. So you might have been friends with them for 35 years, but if you have never contacted them in 35 years, one has to think, okay, well, how much emotional investment do they have in you and you have in them? Also, it's a matter of like not just what you think, but what you think between each other, what you feel between each other. How much do how much do you care about them? So if I have a friend and I know people I haven't seen in a long time, but when I think of them, I think of them fondly. But if I haven't talked to them in, let's say, 10 years, um, I would say they're not my close friend anyway, and they would not be in that 150 because I have no emotional investment in them, right? So they don't occupy that space in the brain that where relationships have to reside, and the commitment and the connection that you have, the feeling that you have for them would drive you to want to contact them in something less than 35 years, you know. So from this explanation, we wouldn't define that person as your friend, even though you may feel fondly about them. When you think about them, you're probably feeling fondly about the person in your mind that you can recall and reconstitute from 35 years ago, not the person today, because it's almost certain they have changed to some degree, just because human beings change. So the question is like, uh, you know, what is that person really? And then that goes to more of his work in terms of like how far out of that concentric circle. The magic number here, the Dunbar's number, which is what he's known for, is the 150 because that's the group size that represents our tribe, right? And he talked about that. Actually, the first time I heard about Dunbar's number, Dunbar wasn't mentioned. It was in a conversation with elder in the Hutterites. And he talked about how over time they had found that somewhere around 125 to 150, they started developing social problems. And so years ago, they decided to, as they approach 150, that they would start to split their tribal groups and then help some of those members join with other members who had sort of were pushing the limits of their numbers and create another Hutterite colony. And he talked also about their management of family relationships, so that when someone got married, they would move to another colony, right? So as to try to stabilize that number around 150. So that's what under 150. I think he was talking about more like 125 was the optimal, but that's the range of that Dunbar number, 125 to 150, somewhere in there. And other people will say, as he mentioned in this presentation, that, okay, some people will, under certain definitions, stretch that to 250, but it starts to, their definition starts to fall apart. And the support for that 250 is not nearly as strong as the support for the number around 150. So we stick at that. And I'm dwelling on that a bit because sometimes people have the 150 in their mind and then they say, oh, there's a 151. That's not true. No, it's not that. It's not that kind of number, right? But it does give us a guideline for what is our working group size, the people that we can have good relationships with. Any other comments about general about Dunbar's number?
Well, I have a question about going, I guess it would be like with a herd interbreeding with the Hutterites, and they did that a lot, in older times in the West. How is that would be part of it as well, or how do you separate those two?
Okay, so I don't know about the herd thing, but I do know that, as I mentioned, they marry outside of their 150 group. Okay, so that's a whole other thing which I don't have data on. Okay, so I could guess, but why? There's no reason. I don't know. Okay. That said, if you look at other examples, one of the things that a lot of those, when we have data, one of the things that a lot of villages did when they either married villages that were close into villages that were close to them, or in some cases they made war on people to go steal brides, to go steal women. That was one of the things. And conquest often had to do with that, going to go raid the other villages or raid the other countries and bring back mates, people to interbreed with. So as much as people like to talk about that pure breed stuff, it's mostly like sociological poppycock. If you look at even the United States, people will think that, oh, we're this pure breed or something. Nah, not so much. Go back and look. Your daddy ain't your daddy, but your daddy didn't know. It's like there's a lot of those things that happen that in fact, people have done studies on how, just given the numbers and the fact that each person has a mother and a father, 4 grandparents, etc., that the amount of, quote, pure breed people in the United States just doesn't add up mathematically. It just can't be. So what happens is a lot of groups, they do like like if you look at Germany or France or places like that, you'll notice that it's not like, these hard lines on the map that people become, a certain group or not. Because people marry over those borders, and they have for centuries, and they have warred, and the boundaries have changed. So just like that, in the case of Hutterites, they do marry other Hutterite groups, right? In fact, people might not know this, but I learned that there were Hutterite groups in Japan. There are Hutterite colonies in Japan. There's a Hutterite colonies in Africa. right? We don't think of those people as Hutterites, but when I got to know them and I talked to them about, where they were, they actually showed me pictures. One Hutterite colony showed me that they were actually one of the kind of like supporters of one of the Hutterite colonies in Africa. And they showed me pictures of the people that they, that was kind of like a sister tribe to them, or sister colony to them, right? So there's a lot more intermarrying than people might think. I mean, we just have maybe in South Dakota, we might mostly have them as almost avatars or effigies or something. We don't mostly know their inner workings, but as I talk to them, I realize that, oh, there's some things that are common, but from going from one colony to the next, they each have their own kind of personality, so it's not as inbred as one might think, is my point there. Barb, you were trying to say something before.
Yeah, and this last discussion has sort of helped. I think that the whole idea of a stable relationship is influenced by things like geography. And, I don't know that many people, I know maybe it's my life, I've moved around a lot. And that group of 150 seems to really change. Even the group of maybe 5 changes. So I think that when I heard so far what the discussion has been, I'm not hearing that that's being taken into consideration. Do you have any more information how geography impacts that group of, either the 5, the 50, or the 150?
Yes, it's very interesting insight. Notice that in this, not to mention the academic one, but in this presentation, they made a point to say it changes. Who that 150 is changes over your lifetime, and it certainly changes in terms of geography. It's really about how many relationships can you juggle at any particular time in your life in any particular place. So let's say, for example, you live in Houston and you're going to have a certain circle of friends and they may be tight. Now you move to San Francisco, that group of relationships will change. Now, some of those people might have been in such an inner circle that you still call them every week, right? But a lot of those people, after about, let's say 15, they're going to start to recede into your relationship meaning that you have contact with them, you do something with them, you know about their ups and downs in life and where they are, if they have a kid or a grandkid. Okay, so, and the reason is really that you can only juggle so many of these people. It's kind of like, how many numbers can you hold in your head at one time? And somebody just determined that most people, 7 was about their limit, which accounts for why, aside from your area code, you have 7 numbers in your telephone number. 10 was the side of the outer limits. That's why we have, with your area code, you have 10. That was not they didn't toss a coin and decide that number. And within those 10 numbers, you have enough, at least at that time, that they decided that there was enough numbers that you said, okay, we're good. We can have a lot of telephone numbers within that group. Now I think we're bumping up to some interesting limits because of cell phones, which they hadn't counted on. But it was also based on the number of how many households do we have to provide telephones for? How many telephones will there be? How many of, and they figure, okay, that's a comfortable number. We can work in with that number. So just like there's a number there, and you'll notice that even with the 7, when people just tell you their telephone number, if you don't write it down, it's hard to remember. But if you had like 3 numbers, you can handle that. Most people can handle 3 numbers. You give them 3 numbers, they can remember that. 4th number, it starts to level off. By the time you get to 7, you have to break it up into 3 and 4 in order and think of them like 2 different numbers. So I mention all that to say that it's about our ability to process data. And to me, that gets to the heart of many of our social problems. It's just we have limited processing power. That we can become more efficient at that, and that's a very good discussion to have as how we can do it. But at the bottom of it, we have to realize that no matter how smart we are, there is a cognitive limitation in terms of our ability to process data. And relationships are one of the more process intensive things that we have to do with our brain. That's why that portion of the brain, the theory goes, increased so much is because in order for us to progress, we have to process more human relations. And we have to do things. We just can't think of, oh, that's a nice person and that's our friend. We actually have to do stuff with them. We have to, I call it picking chicks. You know, we have to have we have to be able to do something. We have to have, in order to feel something for that person, you have to interact with people. And that starts to make the limit of our ability as human beings.
So I have a question, Lawrence. One of the things I was really interested in with the video and just the explanation of the number is how it becomes formalized, like in the Hutterite colonies, like in the military units that you talk about. You mentioned that when things got too far beyond Dunbar's number, there would be difficulties. There might be social problems in the colonies, for instance. I assume there might have been similar kinds of problems in the military units. Does Dunbar or do any of the other scholars that look at this, do they have, can you give examples of what that might be? Are we talking more about interpersonal arguments? Or are we talking about just that the efficiency of the organization goes down? Both? And what kind of things happen about that number?
Okay, so I think from what I can tell, it's about cohesion. Okay, so if you've ever been around military units, there's a lot of talk about cohesion. That's a real important thing. So what is cohesion? It's the ability for you to almost subconsciously anticipate where the other person's going to be and have a sense and a need to work with them, and a sense that your survival and your connection is, you can have an emotional sense that you are connected with them, right? So if you are from a unit and you say we're a unit B, you have an immediate sense of connection with them, okay? So what will happen with lack of cohesion is, whereas the person you have cohesion with or feel a connection to, if they say something that's kind of off, you can pass it off. You can just say, oh, almost as a joke. A good example is there's some people who can call people like a word, and it's an insult. Somebody else and somebody that they know calls them that same thing, and it's a term of endearment, because they have connection. I don't really care what you call me because you always call me for dinner, so you can call me anything. But the other person I don't know, not so much, and the person I know, but they're not really, no, you can't call me that because I don't know you that well. I mean, if you're around, you've heard that. Okay. So it's that kind of cohesion. That's the thing that happens. So as they get more and more people in the group, you'll start to having stronger and stronger cliques, right? I went to a high school that my graduating class was 1,200 people, right? We had 3,000 people in the school, about 3,000 students in that school. most of those people I didn't know. I mean, I see them, every day. I walk, I even have class with a lot of, I had class with a lot of them, but they weren't my friends, you know. Now, if you're in a little school like Roslyn, even though that's not your clique, because you don't have more than 100 kids in the school, 125 kids in the school, those people are your friends, in a way that people from other schools are not most of the time. I mean, you can find exceptions, but for the most part, you feel that because you can see them and you do things with them more often, you know. So it's really, it's a matter of like, they fall apart simply because I can't anticipate your mood. For example, I can't anticipate your needs. I can't anticipate um, your ability to fulfill your own needs, let alone mine. So I don't really know you that well, as just because I can't process that much. I can't talk to you enough times. Because I mean, if you think about it, think about Christmas cards. You know, uh, if you have to do, let's say you have everybody in your Facebook friends, like you had thousands of people in Facebook friends, and you sat down to write each one of them a postcard, that becomes quite a chore, not to mention the expense, right? So it's expensive to maintain these relationships emotionally, intellectually, and financially. So what happens is there grows a distance. And even though you might smile at them, you have less caring for them, let's say, than the people you talk to all the time. So there's a certain kind of, if you can imagine a concentric circle where things start to, it's like depth of field in a photograph. On the edges, things start to get fuzzy. The further you go out, the fuzzier your feelings are for those other people who are outside of that 150 range. Inside, even inside that 150, they're fuzzy at the edges, but as you get closer, they are not as nearly as fuzzy. You can dance with that person, you know, and you know each other's step. If that person, and if you can feel their mood when they call on the phone, like people I talk to all the time, I call them up and I say, "How you doing?" "Oh, fine." "No, you're not fine." There's something in your voice tells me you're not fine. But if I call the guy who's my, I talk to all the time for, let's say, musical advice, but he's not my friend. He's just somebody I call about, like if I'm having a problem with some of my production equipment. He may say the same thing, but I may not pick up on his feelings. Does that make any sense, Jennifer?
I have a question.
Sure.
How is this applicable to just a regular person who says, okay, I want to apply Dunbar's number to my life in some way? Or, you know what I mean? That's not the best way to phrase it, but.
Yeah. Okay. So I would first respond by saying, like much of science, it doesn't matter if you believe it or not. Dunbar's number applies to you, whether you apply it or not. Now, the thing is like, well, how can I use the knowledge of the fact that it's applying to me? How can I use that? First of all, I think we can cut ourselves and others some slack, right? In other words, we expect people, let's say, for example, especially as we're trying to improve our relationship between groups, when we start to understand what is involved in having that emotional connection, we can one, start to realize it isn't as easy as we pretend it is, and then two, we can start to say, well, how can we make it easier? What are the things that we can do to make it easier for people to uh, include people in those nodes that he was talking about at the end, right? In other words, I may have some people that I'm investing in that I would be better off, and the world might be better off if I invested some of that energy into people outside of the node that I have now. Okay. So let's say, for example, I know there's 150 people, and I know that, look, after 150, even at 150, I'm going to be struggling to try to have meaningful relationships with these people. But I want my circles to have greater uh, depth, and I want my circles to have more diversity, because I recognize that diversity is an important uh, component for me. I see the value in that. So some of those people who are just kind of casual relationships, especially the ones I'm struggling with, but I don't see the real value in, I might want to invest that into someone else from another group who would not normally be in my group. Right. And I often, people say, well, how can I meet people from other groups? I don't know anybody. So, okay, if you get out some, in a post-COVID era, if we get out some and we meet some people, we can like just say, hey, start up a conversation um, with people, and maybe you're going to see them a second time in the grocery store, and something they mentioned you bring up again. Hey, how would you were getting your daughter a birthday gift last time? How did that birthday party come out? Or something like that. Now they sort of, there's this, that's like offering, that's the human form of offering a banana, because you said that you in a way that you notice them and you care about them and you care about something that they care about, right? So you develop that relationship. Now, all of that people, all of those, that person's family and friend and stuff, they may never become your friends, but that person is, and by extension, you have access to other nodes. Okay. Um, I can make so many examples of that in my own life, but I will give you one. One of my friends, who was my high school teacher, and after graduation, we kept in contact, and he's still one of my closest friends. He's one of those people that I call often. Okay. So when I was in radio, he called me up one day, and he said, hey, I got this kid. And he would, by the way, I should say, he was a teacher still. And when he called me up, and his thing that he was doing in school is he would take all the kids that no other teachers wanted in their class because they were screw ups. And so they would say, hey, get this kid out or I'm quitting. And so they put all those kids together in classes, and he was teaching them. So you can imagine his life. So anyway, he calls me up one day and he says, hey, I got this kid, and he's a good kid, but he thinks he wants to be bad. And these Chinese gangs are trying to, this Chinese kid, and he said, these Chinese gangs are trying to recruit him. And I have a feeling that he's going to get recruited, but he's a good kid. He doesn't really deserve that in his life. He's had a lot of tough breaks in his life. No dad, his older brother is kind of like beats up on him all the time, and he's looking for a way out. He's got a lot of home problems, but he's a good kid. What do you think? Is there anything you can help me do with him? And I said, okay, well, sure, send him over to my office, because I was in the radio. So he sent the kid over, and I start talking to him, and we start talking about stuff. Because one of the reasons he called me is because he knew that I had relationships with these Chinese gangs from my previous radio station, where I was doing a lot of reporting, and I made friends with some of those kids who were in those gangs. And so that's why he called me about this gang problem, right? Thinking that I could call one of the leaders and say, hey, don't recruit him, leave him alone, So at any rate, this kid comes over, and I'm talking to him, and we get to talking. And so I get him interested in radio. He's on the radio, and I actually give him a job. And I gave him the job. I had the station hire him on as my apprentice, and he was still in high school. And what I would do is, I knew that this kid it was hard for him to talk to new people, so I got him the job of going to interview people when they came out of movies for a movie report that I was doing a people's movie review. Okay. So long story short, this kid ends up working, in this radio station. He goes on to be a photographer for high fashion magazines. And this kid is still part of my inner circle, right? That's over 50 years ago. Okay. Now, saying that, with that said, one of the other things that happened is I became like a de facto part of his family, right? When I went to Chinatown and met his mother at coffee, she would introduce me to her friends as one of her sons. It was one of those, it was, so I got access to this whole other node from this one contact. Okay. So, and as a result, those people knew people who knew people. So that's why I'm saying you can transfer that, knowing that one person in your inner circle, and you're still widening your circle, but they're not in that 150, because I don't go and talk to those people all the time. Right? I'm not building anything with them. They're not part of my quote tribe. Does that make any sense, or was that too much information?
I think it does. I mean, Crystal, did you want to say something? I was just gonna say, yeah, it seems like we get overextended these days. Most people feel that with social media and everything else, and it's occurred to me too that maybe the people that you have like less high value relationships with, and that you're just kind of staying in touch with just to be in touch, you might be better off just not doing that anymore and pursuing other like friendships or even just hobbies instead of that. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think part of expanding our brain and utilizing our brain is to have as many relationships as we feel we can manage. And each person, they have a lot of stuff that they have to deal with, within themselves. So I don't think that there's a hard number in saying, oh, it should be 2, or it should be 20, or it should be 150. It's just really recognizing that there's more to it than just your will to have a bigger relationship. It costs emotionally. But on another side of that question, if I answer the question, another way to answer the question, what difference does it make, this Dunbar number? One of the differences is recognizing that there's 7.5 billion people in the world. Out of that 7.5 billion, you should be able to find your 150. And that's as many as you're going to be able. I mean, and think about that. 150 gets lost as a rounding number in 7.5 billion. And they say we're going to have another billion and a billion and a half more. So you got more chances, for friends. But when you think about how big that, how it's so possible for you to have as many friends as you want if you're as open to relationships as you can be. That's my take home. So we're right at 11:30. I want to thank you all for participating. Oh, did you have something you want to say, Crystal? Yeah, go ahead.
I just have one thing I just want to, I never even heard about Dunbar or this whole thing. But when I think about, like Dakota, we say Kodas. So it means like an ally. For me, it's like Koda's friend or ally. I think I already have enough to think about. Like, I don't worry. I've never worried about, oh, do I have 50 friends? Let me see, how many friends do I have? Do I have 100? Now I only have 100. I need 50 more. That's like too much for me, because I do like, I consider all my family when my kids, younger and the grandkids say, "Oh, I don't have any friends," I'm like, "Well, I don't have any friends either, honey." My family is my friends, extended family. I consider all of them my friends. My job that I do, my community projects, volunteering, my leadership responsibilities, all of those put me in contact with daily people that I consider my allies and my friends. So when I go home at night, it doesn't really hit me that I never really think about like sad that I don't have friends, that I'm not having enough interaction because I have enough. So I don't really understand I don't even know if I like or agree with the 150 number. I haven't heard of it until now. So to me, it's like, I don't really even want to know about that. One time, here's about a friend. So very quickly, I went to Hawaii for a month. My daughter was in the Army. She was having a baby. I got to go over there and be with her while grandson was born. And I didn't have much money. She lived there. I had a place to stay. I didn't have a lot. When I was coming home after 1 month, I met this lady. She was a Hawaiian lady. She sat next to me, her and her daughter on the plane. And she said, she was talking to me. We visited. She gave me her business card, told her who we introduced ourselves, talked about maybe like a half hour. When I was getting off the plane, she told her daughter, let's pray for Auntie. And she took my hand. Her daughter took my hand and we prayed. She prayed for my safety, my safe travels. I got off the plane and she said, Crystal, because you go from Oahu to Maui and then you get another plane into California. They pick up people. So I was getting out, or she was getting off. We were exchanging planes, and she said, "Crystal," she called me back, and all these people around. She said, "Come here. I want to take you into this. Let's go into this gift shop. I want to buy you some gifts that you take home to your family from Hawaii." So she took me in there, and I'm like, "No, I don't need any of that." Of course, I didn't tell her I didn't have any money, but she was like, "Here, get these cookies, get this candy, get all these things. Take these home to your family. And anytime you come here to Maui, you have my card. You call me because you're my friend." And I just started crying because I never had anybody show me a generosity right out of the blue. Because in my mind and my heart, I had been wishing that I could take treats home to my family, but I did not have the money for that. I was there for one purpose. I didn't have a lot of free money. So I accepted that. And just like a couple of weeks ago, I was looking through my papers and I found your business card. And I looked at that, and in my heart, I was like, I have a friend over there in Maui. Maybe if I ever go there, my granddaughter bought a house over there. So I'm like, if I ever go there and visit, maybe I would stop and call her. Because even I tell my sister, look at this card. I got a friend over there. And then that's it. That friendship, we met, we had that connection. And I think it changed my life for, even though we're not talking and asking how are you, how was your day, that connection still really stuck with me. And it probably will forever because not of things what she said, but how she made me feel just for that brief hour we exchanged prayer and, trading of goods. So, it was good conversation today, but like, I'm not really going to start counting, friends or hoping that I can make sure I got 150 people I contact with every single day. On my Facebook, I've got, 1,129 friends already. I went through my Facebook several times trying to get people out that I don't know. And I've done that, and I'm still down to 1,129. That people that I've had some connection with in the past. And, so I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think I really appreciate that you brought that out, Crystal. And part of the reason is because I think it points to this takes a little time to settle into. For example, he actually says, it's not about you have to go and have this number of friends. You can have 2 friends and that's fine for you. You can, but what Dunbar's number really is about is like, if you take for example, the lady you said you met in Maui, okay? But you're not, even though you had that card and you had that experience with her and you hold a fond place for her in your heart, you are not what we call picking her ticks, right? In other words, you're not grooming her every day, and she's not grooming you every day. So these are the kind of relationships that tend to have more meaning because you're with those people every day. Kind of like the difference between your kids and other people's kids. You may even like those other people's kids, but there's something a lot deeper in terms of like you dealing with your own kids every day. Or if you get a relative's kid and that kid comes and lives in your house for a month and you interact with them differently, you'll notice a different in quality between the first day they came and the 30th and the 60th day. There's just a difference in quality of the relationship. That's what the Dunbar's number is about. It's not like, I don't like these people, I like these people, these are in group and out group. It turns to be that way. Or if you look at, for example, look at the number of people in a clan, okay? And say, well, how many people are in a clan? You know, and what kind of relationship do they have versus the people who they may be Dakota, but they live in another place. And how do people, what's the relationship? Or somebody who comes even from Ojibwe, but they come to live with people in your area, then you start to develop a close relationship with them, And I have a lot of people, for example, who are closer to me than my family, than my blood relatives, because I do more stuff with them. I share more stuff with them. They give me more bananas, I give them more bananas of one kind or another, And this is not always physical stuff. It's that interchange. So I say that to say that, yes, there is more to think about this Dunbar's number. And it's not limiting. It's really explanatory. It's like saying, it's not saying, well, this is your numbers you should have. It's not about that. It's really about understanding that you have to have like a certain kind of investment in relationships. And that those investments are going to be finite, simply, if nothing else, but time. No matter how smart you are, there's only so many, so much that you can talk about, with 300 people, So anyway, our time is up, but let's I'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.